Welcome back. Too Much Future, the show where we play through and talk about the Fallout games we're playing through. Fallout New Vegas on episode 45. I'm Cameron, and with me as always is...
Michael.
Hey there.
Hi.
No, I'm looking around here. I'm looking around you. Nope, nothing on top of the head.
Mm-hmm.
No, let me, okay, I'm looking, okay. We're in some... Well, this is odd. You're wearing sneakers from 1985. Are you a sneakerhead, Michael?
No, I'm Michael McFly.
Oh, that's okay.
And I've come back from the past.
Oh no, that's awful. That's the worst.
This new
that's
gimmick.
Let me replace you with someone better. Home on the range.
Dropping behind my microphone, like doing a Jekyll and Hyde thing, coming back up with the cowboy hat.
Mm-hmm, of course. This episode, we're talking about a big old quest. A big old quest out of here in the Sierra Nevadas. The cowboy words. We're doing a quest that's about the Great Khans, huh?
Mm-hmm. From all the way back in Fallout 1.
Well, kind of. I learned a little bit about that. But tell me about how you got there.
Well, I had already met the Khans because, as I said in the previous episode, Cook from the Powder Gangers asked me to go ask them if they could join their... Oh, the word that they use is tribe. The Powder Gangers are a gang. The Great Khans are a tribe. And then also there is a level at which Fallout operates where these two things are fungible. Which is not a thing that we should accept uncritically, but this is how this game tends to think. So that was how I found the Khans, and that was my first sort of experience of walking into what I already mentioned was their very cool hideout, Red Rock Canyon.
Yeah, this is interesting. Oh, yeah, that's right, because you don't have any... No one's sending you here.
No, I'm a free agent, baby.
That's right. Well, so I got sent by the NCR. The NCR, the ambassador that I had been working with on the Strip, he said, "Look, I don't have any more missions for you anymore. You need to go talk to someone higher up the ladder." So I go talk to Cassandra Moore, who is an officer at the Hoover Dam, and she says, "Hey, this is what's up. The Great Khans have allied with the Legion, and I need you to get rid of the Great Khans. Like, we can't have this happening. We can't be getting attacked from both sides. They're pretty powerful as far as an independent agent goes. So we need to get rid of them. I need you to go." She basically says, "You need to go kill them." And I said, "Well, can't I do anything else?" And she says, "Well, you can try, but at the end of the day, I just need them dealt with. And if you need to kill them, you should do that." Pretty hardcore information from the NCR here, not the multicultural utopia that sometimes they present themselves as. This is the displacing and violent part of the NCR that maybe doesn't get talked about as much by the NCR for obvious reasons. So anyway, that's how I did that, and that's how I get to the place where I go talk to the Khans. Without that framework, I'm curious about how this starts for you then. Obviously you just go there, but like, I don't know, what's the on-ramp into working with the Khans look like?
Well, this is not the first I've heard of the Khans, obviously, because we've had dealings with them before within the main plot, and then I got some information from Yes Man about them, which is that he thinks, the specific quote is they're dirty, is what he says. So Yes Man, not much better, I think, than the NCR in terms of his feelings on these things. But I go in, and somehow, I'm not really sure how I know this. I assume I maybe got it through some other piece of dialogue with another character, and I didn't quite internalize it, because, that's kind of one of the things that happens in a game like this. I could ask when I was talking to Papa Khan, who is the leader of the Khans, something about, I was like, "I hear you're allied, or could I convince you to break your allegiance with Caesar's Legion?" Which I guess I learned that somehow. And also, there's a Legion dude sitting next to him. I find them, by the way, in like a sort of ranch home that's sitting up on a cliff somewhere. And this is called their longhouse, which again is playing into this really gross thing that Fallout does, where people just revert to tribe, like ahistorical, continuously recurring tribal structures and terminologies that are stolen from actual like North American indigenous peoples. Like that there's just sort of like this natural progression of society, and after the apocalypse you fall back a couple of steps and then you have to work your way back up the ladder. Anyhow,
well, more than the anyhow, because yes, that's exactly right. And what I think is notable about the Great Khans here in a broad sense is that this is almost like the New Vegas seems to try to commit to the bit in a way. Like, I don't have a better way of framing it other than that. That Fallout 2 in particular, I mean, in Fallout 1 and Fallout 2, we talked about that a lot on the show. You can go back and listen to those episodes, but exactly what you just said, right? There's this kind of assumptive logic that you fall back into this ahistorical, universal, tribal, quote unquote, kind of patterning after the war. What New Vegas does here is says, like, it's not okay, fine, that happens, but it's a full cultural form. They're not just tribals in the generic sense. Ho ho ho! You might think that they're generic, but they're not. They have specific cultural practices. They have a longhouse. They have Papa Khan, who's a Khan of Khans. He talks in all of this language about like pride and the strength of their people and all this kind of stuff, right? Like there's a way that the generic approach in trope gets filled out or like tripled down on here that only makes it feel more uncomfortable.
Right.
It doesn't not in any way make me be like, oh, okay, well, maybe they're trying to wrestle with this or think through with it. They're like, no, let's take a lot more indigenous stereotype work, native stereotype, and let's cram it all in here. And that will lend it feels like to me, the purpose for that is to make it feel like it has an air of authenticity about it. That we're not using the word tribe in an unearned way seems to be what New Vegas is saying here. And I'm with you. I think that's right. It doesn't do anything more than the other games have done. This is really a repetition as far as the broad strokes of it, but the specificity of it is actually quite different. Like, calling something a longhouse, for example, and that being represented in the game's labeling of the physical thing, as opposed to it just being a building that you walk in and out of. So, like I said, I don't have a better word than commitment to the bit, but there's a way that this feels even worse to me than the previous games because of the way that it doubles down and tries to fill this world out. I don't know.
Yeah, well, I mean, not only does it establish like the thing with the powder gangers and the Khans, not only does that sort of imply the fungibility between like gang and tribe, but here in the Khans themselves, we're also seeing this conflation or fungibility of like North American indigenous peoples like terms and practices with the Khans, which are like, a group of people from a completely different era of history on a completely different part of the planet. And those like that all gets mixed up together too in this blender. And it's not great.
Yeah.
One thing I do like.
Yeah.
is that you can see when you're coming in, you can see the paintings that they put on the walls of the canyon, which, in its own thing, again, like think about what type of people are trying to be invoked here, which groups and what sort of histories and so on. What I do like about this, though, is that you can see their history, which is that they fought the three families of the Strip. And so you get like their representation of the families. So you see, like, I don't know if you took a look at these, but I was like looking at these rocks and I'm like, oh, that's a person from, the White Glove Society, because it's like a sort of like creepy stick figure with a mask and a strange fancy dress. And it's like, oh, this one is obviously one of the chairmen. So I think that's like, in and of itself kind of a neat little thing to do, but also gets touched by all of this other stuff. But I think like it's neat to get like the history of this particular like NPC grouping in this way.
What do you think about their about the cons? I don't know. It's not crucifying. They're displaying of human bodies.
I don't know. That was, see, the weird thing about that is that so Fallout 3, and we talked about this, and we've talked about it in this run, and we also talked about it at the time, like Fallout 3, the like raider gangs were just like Mad Max cannibals, and every time you went into a raider like location, there were just bodies, like bags of gore and bodies all over and things crucified, and just that was all that world was fucking body parts. You can bleep that out. I didn't mean to swear. Anyhow, Fallout New Vegas very much seems to pivot in the other direction, where we have kind of all of these groups that are not like just displaying corpses constantly, and then suddenly we kind of have a little bit of it coming back with, I mean, the people who are really bad about doing it are of course the Legion, and I don't know if we're meant to take maybe like the cons following the Legion's example there, or I think I might even remember back in Fallout 1 there were maybe corpses hung up around a con hideout or something.
Yeah, that was kind of my thing. I couldn't really figure out if that was signaling for that or not. You know, the unfortunate thing, I don't really like it. I don't like the idea that like, you know, how do you demonstrate that someone is serious and bad? Well, they're gonna, you know, hang corpses up everywhere. And I know that that is a real world practice, and I know that that happens and has happened historically quite often. I still don't necessarily know if the shortcutting is not interesting to me, I guess, ultimately. But what I do like about the cons, like iconography like that, is that you can see if there are cons around an area that you're going to, due to seeing those like weird little, you know, spindly looking, I don't even know what they're called, like crucifying things that they're putting up, the like backers that they're tying people to. Because like later in this episode, we have to like I had to find a cons camp. And I found it by looking at the tops of hillsides, and I was like, "Oh shit, cons must be here," because there's their kind of thing. So I really like the environmental storytelling that's afforded by signaling, "Hey, when you're around, you're going to see," or when cons are around, you're going to see this stuff. I think it's really cool. I just wish it was something else would be, you know, more to my preference. But anyway, sorry, I've detracted us from talking to PapaCon. What happened for you here?
Well, so I find out that, well, I already know, and then talk to PapaCon about the fact that the cons are in an alliance with Caesar, and I'm like, hey, could I make you not do that? And he's like, absolutely not, more or less. He's not really going to listen to me. There are two other guys in the, like, sitting at the table here with him. One is one of his advisors, a dude named Regis, who doesn't have much to say right now, and then the other guy is someone named Carl, who is the representative of Caesar's Legion. And he, you know, talks about how honored he is to be here and to like, you know, represent the Legion with the cons and so on and so forth. There's not a lot to be done in these conversations. You're just learning who these people are. And then when you step outside, you are immediately confronted by Regis, who teleported out to catch you at just this moment. And he talks to you about how he is not particularly on board with the idea of the cons joining the Legion, because he knows, like what everyone else knows, that the Legion is a like slave army, and that they have taken every other tribe that they have ever worked with and just enslaved them and sort of incorporated them into this, you know, fascist machine. And the reason PapaCon is on board is because he's been told that that's not going to happen, that Caesar's Legion is going to make an exception for them. And then once Legion has the strip and kind of Vegas, then I think it's they promise them like everything west or something like that will be open for the cons to take. And Regis doesn't believe this, but he wants harder proof. And he also says, we can, the good thing about Papa Khan is that he listens to his advisors, of whom I am one. So if you can get me this hard proof that the Legion is lying to us, that they are just going to, forcibly assimilate us, then great. Here are the other people you need to talk to. Jack and Diane. And then what is the name of Melissa is the other one. Yeah. So Jack and Diane, who I don't remember what he says about them specifically, but I know Melissa, he says, is someone who she kind of has a fantasy of being a high-ranking soldier in the Legion. So, and this is, contrary to the fact that the Legion seems to be pretty damn patriarchal and does not put women in leadership roles, but she's been told that that's going to happen for her. So, Regis says, if you can, put things to her that way, then maybe she'll change her tune and she'll tell Papa Khan to do something else. And then
she wants to be, I'm not 100% sure what the word is, but it's something like specularum. She wants to be an explorer.
Yeah, speculatora.
Yeah, speculatora. I thought that was a really interesting kind of touch, that leaning into for the Legion, there's still a frontier in some ways. Like the Legion's frontier is the West. And the Khans are promised the West essentially by the Legion. But anyway, so Melissa does that. Jack and Diane.
They're just advisors. And this is where Red Rock Canyon turns from something that's really cool to see to something that's really annoying. You have to walk all the way through this and find the little path that's going to take you out of the big open area with all of the little tents and houses that you can see. You have to follow this path all the way back to the very, very back of the canyon where Jack and Diane have their drug lab set up, because this is one of the things. This is, something that the Khans were doing in Fallout 1 and Fallout 2 is they were producing chems. And so Jack and Diane essentially have a meth lab out here. And I go back and I find them sleeping. They're it's nighttime, so they're both asleep, and I just wake him up. And I tell him, first of all, I tell him hey, do you think you could synthesize some good chemicals that aren't drugs, like medicine and stuff? And this character, he talks hey, Daddy-O. He's got this whole sort of weird beatnik kind of affect that is completely at odds with everything else about the Khans. But he thinks it's a cool idea to make medicine, so he decides he's going to do that. And I also tell him to not like the Legion, and I don't remember how I did that, and I didn't write it down.
So I didn't do this. You can talk to him and say, hey, you know that the Legion enslaves women, right?
Oh, that's right. That's what I did.
I didn't have the option to do it because my speech isn't good enough, but I was able to be shown that. I ultimately did it through Diane, but you did it through him?
Yeah, so that's what I did. That was my speech option. And this is the other thing that Regis tells you, is that you don't actually have to convince both Diane and Jack. If you convince one, then the other changes their opinion too. And so I told him, if the Legion takes over here, they're going to separate you from Diane and, force her into sex work. And he's like, that's not cool, dig? And so
yeah, basically.
Yeah, so he changes his opinion. And because of that, then Diane also changes her opinion. But I woke her up just to talk to her to kind of see if I had anything else that I could, any other little bits of information I could get. There wasn't, but you talked more to her. So how did that go?
Yeah, I talked to her and basically I said, hey, you make drugs, right? And she said, yeah, I love making drugs. It's great. And I said, do you know what Caesar thinks about drugs? And she was like, no. And I said, well, he kills people who do drugs. He's not into it. And she goes, no way. If you could prove that to me. And by the way, this is a well-known fact about the Legion.
Yeah.
This is not secret knowledge, player character only knowledge. Everyone knows this.
I'm pretty sure it's one of the things that Volpes and Kulta yelled at us. like in the middle of a pile of corpses in the town that he had just destroyed.
Yeah, so it seems like, I mean, maybe that's my job. Maybe I should let her know. But in any case, so I tell her that, and she says, "Well, I don't know. If you can prove that to me, then I will. Maybe I'll listen to you." And this is where it gets weird, because then I get a quest marker to go outside Cottonwood Cove. I go outside Cottonwood Cove. There's a dude named Anders who is like hanging on. He's crucified on a cross, and I cut him down. And I'm like, "Hey, are you Anders who I'm looking for?" As far as I know, Diane did not mention anyone named Anders. So there's like some weird stuff going on here. But basically, he's a drug runner. And he was actually trying to go into the Legion to like do some drug selling. And they caught him and they, crucified him. And so he goes, "Yeah, this is bad." So I let him go, and I go back and talk to Diane, and she says, "Yeah, Anders came back and said that the Legion hates drugs, so I believe you now." And so that's how it was resolved for me. So very similar kind of mechanism, but basically telling them like basic facts about the Legion that I guess people just don't know.
Yeah.
But it seems like everyone else on the planet knows. But also, the Great Khans are they don't seem like they're connected up with other people too much. They're kind of secluded away. So maybe they legitimately don't know.
Yeah, I mean, is it, by this point, I don't remember if I've gotten some stuff from Papa Khan about, basically, like, the thing about the Khans is that they have a lineage all the way back to Fallout 1, but these people, like, they were driven out of that region by the NCR. Like, they are, like, they were driven into the Mojave, and now they're trying to kind of, like, make their go of it here, and that's kind of, sort of the tension with them generally, is that they are our interlopers in that way.
Yeah, later on in this quest, I got kind of a bumper quest at the end to learn about the Khans, and so I had to go talk to a follower of the Apocalypse who's like an anthropologist. Did you talk to him?
No, I saw the opportunity for this quest, but I chose to resolve it differently.
Gotcha. Yeah, there are some speech options that we'll talk about that I'm sure that were more available to you, but yeah, I was able to learn about the Khans' history, and what you find out is that there's some funny parts to it here, because the guy says, and he's like learning about the tribes, and that's his thing. He's basically, like I said, an anthropologist, and he says, "Yeah, I just love learning about people, and I did a little bit of research on the Khans and found out that they're from the NCR originally, like way back in the day." And their original incarnation was defeated by some wandering wasteland guy, like happened all the time back then. And then, later they reformed to the new Khans. And wouldn't you know it, that some other wandering wasteland guy came in and beat them up for some reason. And then he says, this is actually really cool. He says, some people think that was actually the same guy who did it, like the same character who did both things. But we all know that that's not true because the dates don't line up in any way. So there's some fun stuff going on there about thinking through the plot events of Fallout 1 and Fallout 2. And he says, basically after that, they were driven out of the NCR. They come out to the Mojave and they kind of build up as that happens. And now, so that's all he knows. From talking to Papa Khan, I fill in the other piece of the information, or the other piece of their history, which is that when at first they were all kind of hanging out, all of the groups who end up becoming the families of New Vegas, they're all kind of in competition. Great Khans are in the mix there. They're doing stuff. Those groups end up kind of being folded into the Vegas families. And so when the NCR kind of really start making a push and coming into the Mojave, the Khans are able to be the primary raider group who are attacking them. And they're just demolishing the NCR, he says. There's a lot of prestige, a lot of honor in that. They're like kicking ass. And then, and at that point, they were hanging out at Bitter Springs. Mm-hmm. You remember Bitter Springs? We talked all the way about this, like many, many episodes ago. Okay, in Bitter Springs, that was their base of operations. The NCR tracks them back to Bitter Springs and surrounds them, and are like sieging them. The Great Khans send out their women and children, and the NCR gun them down. Mm-hmm. So they just slaughter all of these civilians. Very evocative of this is another moment where the developers of New Vegas are taking real world instances So very much pulling from, I think, just general culture knowledge about things like Wounded Knee, and the American military, a history of military action that kills civilians that ultimately ends up with civilians being killed, and then there being long memories of that, and then lots of kind of political force that comes out of that. And so there's this, again, there's this kind of moment of borrowing from real native history in the United States in order to create this future native group that has resonance, but not too much resonance. So, again, is pretty uncomfortable feeling, and feels like it's being done to kind of fill out the realism of this group that is ultimately fictional. But in any case, so that fills in all the knowledge that we didn't have about Bitter Springs before. That's why the NCR is kind of held up to be murderers, because they did do that. And so because of that, there's a lot of hatred for the NCR. So, for example, I bring up a couple times, hey, wouldn't it be interesting if you hung out with the NCR and became an ally, not just abandoning Caesar's Legion, but getting with the NCR? And Papa Khan is like, if you bring that up again, I will kill you. That level of, because it's only a few years ago. It's a very recent memory for them, and that's why they relocated to Red Rock Canyon after that. This is kind of a retreat position for them. So that's all to say, right? Yeah, we get all this kind of history of that, and about why they are there, and about why they have the political positions that they do. What did you do about Melissa?
So Melissa is incredibly frustrating because you get the marker on your map.
Oh, yep. So this happened to you too, huh?
Mm-hmm. And I try to approach it from kind of the place where I am. Coming in at a straight line, and it turns out you can't do this. You have to jump up a whole bunch of ledges. There's like a bunch of, this is the days before you see that mountain, you can go there. Because you see like a ledge that goes up, and then there's like an invisible wall that keeps you from going all the way over this big ledge to just get to her, because she is clearly on the other side of this thing. But maybe there's some place where the invisible wall breaks or something, but it's just like bouncing up, and I can't get over it, and I should be able to because I just jumped up the other thing. And so I have to walk all the way around this damn rock formation, which turns out to be a quarry. And then you get into the quarry, and surprise, it's filled with death claws.
And not just one or two, you're not exaggerating. Filled with death claws.
Mm-hmm.
Chock full of death claws.
All over the place. So I go into stealth. I use a stealth boy, and I sneak past all of the death claws, and I run up the little embankment or whatever, and this just takes forever. It's helped out by the fact that recently I've leveled up and I've gotten a perk that lets me move as fast as I want to when I'm sneaking without any sort of penalties, so I can be sneaking and moving as fast as possible. It still takes a while. And also I have the way that this game treats companions when you're in stealth is very weird, because I can't be seen. Therefore, Boone and Eddie, who are behind me but completely visible and just kind of crouching, appear to be also sort of invisible, unless they're not, because at a couple points they get kind of pulled away by some Deathclaw battles that they're having, and I don't have time for that. I need to find Melissa. So there's a point in my gameplay where I am trying to figure out how to get up to Melissa now, because once you get sort of behind all the Deathclaws, there's still all these ledges you have to navigate and figure out your way up. And there's a point where I pause and I look back, and I can see, because I'm crouched into stealth. Boone is also crouched into stealth, and I can see him like in the distance, having recently been knocked unconscious by a death claw or something, and he's gotten back up, and he's like running to catch up to me. And the companions will move actually extra fast when you've progressed a certain distance from them. So I can just see like Boone crouched down, like speed walking, like speed squat running, all the way up this quarry wall to me. But anyway. Then I eventually find Melissa and her like little group of cons. And Melissa, unless I'm misremembering, Melissa has a New Zealand accent.
Yes, so Melissa is oh dang, I looked this up. Yes, so she does. There is a interesting explanation for this. So, did you look this up? Did you check any of this out?
I did not look it up. If it wasn't in her dialogue, if I couldn't be like, "Hey, why do you have a New Zealand accent?" I didn't bother looking into it.
Well, I looked it up afterward because I was like, "This is pretty odd." There's like no one else who has.
It's pretty like ostentatious, like just in terms of things like thinking through like, I'm an audio director for this game. Maybe that person doing the New Zealand accent should not be doing that for this particular game, but apparently there's a reason. So
it's interesting like a bunch of different ways. Okay, so this is an answer from Joshua Sawyer's Tumblr, where he answers all these questions that people have about the games he's worked on. This is the question: is there any particular reason why Melissa in the Great Khan Encampment speaks with a New Zealand accent? I know the voice actress is Zoe Bell, but she did a bunch of other voices as well and does a pretty passable American accent for those. Quick pause here. Do you know who Zoe Bell is?
Yes, I do. She is a actor and stunt performer, probably best known for being in Quentin Tarantino's film Death Proof, and she also, prior to that, was Uma Thurman's stunt double during the Kill Bill films.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so an interesting, like someone who is a recognizable celebrity, who is in Fallout New Vegas. Okay, so, but Sawyer says this. I won't name names, but someone ignored an explicit instruction I gave that all characters native to the Mojave Wasteland should have American accents. By the time I heard her recording in-game, it was too late to change it. It was a good performance. It just wasn't what Melissa's accent was supposed to be. So there you go.
Okay.
Just someone straight up didn't give a shit. And they were like, I want to have this accent in here. Now, it's even weirder because of her relationship to other people in the Wasteland.
Melissa, you mean, not Zoe Bell.
Well, no, Zoe Bell. Zoe Bell, of course, is Mr. House's niece, and it's weird for her to play two roles. Mm-hmm. Melissa. What did you do with Melissa here?
So I just talked to her, and I was like, "Hey, the Legion doesn't let women become anything, right?" And she was like, "Really? Dang, that sucks. I guess I'm not gonna back joining the Legion anymore."
Oh, that's really funny. So I think that is gated. Was that gated behind a speech check for you or something?
I think it was, yeah.
Okay. So I eventually could do that, but I had to do a quest for her first. She is waiting in Deathclaw City here.
Yes.
For a drug drop. A chems drop, like a supply drop so that they can take the chems back to Red Rock Canyon to make drugs out of them. So, and she says, hey, I'm waiting for my guy, but my guy hasn't showed up yet, and I can't leave because this is my job. I got to do it. So will you go to the closest town here and figure out what's going on? I go look at the town to the map marker. There's a suitcase there. I look in the suitcase, no drugs. So then I go to the guy who lives in that house, and I talk to him. His name is something Lewis. It's something really weird. Hold on. Chomps Lewis is his name. The most Sword Coast, Coast to Coast ass name character in this game. Mm-hmm. His name's Chomps Lewis, and Chomps Lewis says, yeah, I normally am the person who's delivering these chems, and I'm kind of a middle person from the NCR. So basically, supplies are being stolen from the NCR and moved through a couple different people and then being given to the Great Khans. So, as we have established several times, the NCR is, porous as hell. Information's leaking out of this thing. Supplies are leaking out of this thing. It's not the best operation. Chomps Lewis also reveals that he is Melissa's dad.
What?
Yeah. And that's why he's doing this, and being kind of the go-between, because, it's his daughter. You know, he's going to help her out. She joined the cons a few years ago, and that's okay. Chomps Lewis is a mine worker from the Mojave and sounds like one.
Mm-hmm.
She has a New Zealander accent, so it's even more odd given the scenario here. But you eventually learn. I keep going down this quest. I learned that there's a guy in Prim who works for the NCR, who's like the quartermaster supply officer there, and he's the person who's been stealing from it. And I go to him and I was like, "Hey, man, what is with where are the Kims?" Because Chomps has told me that he hasn't made his delivery. This guy's name's Tyrone. I say, Tyrone, what's going on here, dude? And he says, look, they're getting suspicious. I'm stealing too much. What do you want from me? I have a strength check, like an intimidation check here, and I can say, oh, I'm sorry, I can't hear you over the sound of all of my muscles. What were you saying again about not being able to get these supplies? And he says, fine. Here's the supplies. And then I do the same thing. I take him to Melissa. Melissa takes those supplies from me and says, and I'm able to do the same thing you did. So a little micro quest here. Will it hurt your feelings to know that you didn't have to go through all those death claws?
No.
Okay. Because there's 2 entrances to this quarry, and all you have to do is go up the other side.
Of course. I just probably, went on the other side of it and hit that invisible wall and was like, well, damn, and didn't think to go in the other direction.
Yep. There's 2 little entrances. I had to fight 3 death claws, but I did not have to stealth through or any of that kind of stuff. Somewhere here, I don't know where this happened. I fought a fiend, a bunch of fiends who attacked me, and fought a named fiend named Lewis or something like that. That's not his name, so don't go looking for Lewis. But I fought a named fiend, who obviously is an important quest character somewhere, because when he died, he dropped 2 important items. One of which is his head, and the other of which is a driver, a golf club.
Huh.
That's named after him. It's Lewis's driver. His name is not Lewis, but it's something like that. Do you know about this item? Do you know anything about this?
No, I don't.
Okay, so it's just a driver, and it's a pretty hefty, 2-handed weapon. What's interesting about it is that it has when you go into VATS with it, you get 2 different options. You get, on one hand, hit your target, but on the other hand, just a button that's labeled 4. F-O-R-E with an exclamation point, like you would have with when you hit a golf ball.
Mm-hmm.
4, that kind of thing. Sports, that kind of thing. If you hit that button, the character using it swings it like a golf club. And you get an automatic, or every time I've done it, you get an automatic critical hit. And when you get a critical hit as Tonk, enemies immediately ragdoll. So Tonk is able, in VATS, to hit people with a golf club like they're a golf ball, and then they fly through the air. It's awesome.
That's fantastic.
It's super cool. And that's kind of because death claws still chew through me. I'm wearing combat armor and stuff, and I'm in melee range. I can't really take their health down too easily. And so my strategy is to let them get close, and then I four them and knock them down, and then I just hit them a bunch of times with the racket or not racket, but golf club, while they've fallen down. But it's a really cool, weird little unique mechanic that is pretty fun.
That's great.
It's good stuff. You can see me legit knock a rad scorpion into the sky in the footage somewhere. Hopefully that'll be in there. But okay, so we've convinced Melissa. We've done a little ditty about Jack and Diane. Where are you at now? What else? Oh, you got to convince Regis.
Yeah, now we have to convince Regis.
So I had a pretty interesting way I did this, but very curious about how you did it.
Yeah. You'll remember from the previous episode that the Legion hates me now. I'm vilified by them. Things not mentioned up to this point is, the couple of Legion assassin squads that I had to take out while I was fumbling around trying to get to Melissa. So Regis tells me that there's a couple things that can happen. Well, like one, he's like, you can get Carl, who's the legionary ambassador here, to sort of, ruin his relationship with Papa Khan. But that's not enough. Like Regis himself also needs his proof that the Legion plans on forcefully assimilating the Khans. So one of the things I do is I go back into the Longhouse and I talk to Carl, and he talks about, how honored he is to be here with the Khans and so on. And I have speech checks that I can do where I am basically like goading him into... What I do is at every opportunity, I talk about how cool the Khans are, and in fact imply that they are much better than the Legion, and that he's much happier hanging out here than being back with the Legion, and that the Khans are like better soldiers, and they're stronger, and so on, and more honorable. And, trying to get him to explicitly agree with me about these things. Up until the point that his chauvinism cannot stand it, and he like loses his cool and starts yelling about how disgusting he finds the Khans, and he can't wait until he gets to leave. And this makes Papa Khan so angry that he kills Carl. Great. So that's happened. Mm-hmm. In terms of like getting the proof of what I need to do for, Regis, it's telling me that I need to go to Cottonwood Cove. So I go to Cottonwood Cove, and as I'm approaching, Boone, who's still with me, is like, hey, just so you know, I hate the Legion, and if you keep going in this direction, I'm gonna shoot everyone. And I'm like, yeah, me too. And so I stealth, use a stealth boy, sneak into Cottonwood Cove. And then at some point, either I walk too close to someone or one of my companions does, and they realize that I'm there, and they're like, holy crap, it's that woman we hate. So I have to fight everyone in Cottonwood Cove, and I do. I wipe them out, and then I check my map marker, because I'm like, what do I need to get here? The map marker is no longer in Cottonwood Cove. It is moved. It is now in the fort itself, a.k.a. Caesar's headquarters. So I stop and I think about this for a little bit, because all of the Legion hates me. They will auto-hostile me. At this point, I'm kind of ragged. I've been, during this play session, I've done a lot of combat. I know my armor is like near to breaking. I've gone through a lot of my ammo stores. I'm even low on stealth boys and stim packs at this point. And I think, no, luck's with me. This is gonna be good. So I hop on the boat and I, zip on over to the fort. Now, here's the other thing to be clear on here. I could, if I wanted to, steal some of the armor from the legionaries that I've killed and put it on. I did that with the White Glove Society, no problem. I'm not going to wear Legion armor. I dislike them enough that I would never do that. So I, bop on over to the fort. Chaos immediately ensues as everyone auto-hostiles me. And I run all the way up through the fort, like killing who I can and hiding from who I can. I get into like the central compound and use another stealth boy. And I like sneak around. Boone and Eddie are like fighting legionaries and getting knocked out, but I leave them. They're drawing fire from me. That's great. I sneak all the way to Caesar's tent. And because it turns out that's where the quest marker is I have to go all the way into Caesar's damn house. And once I'm there, more chaos ensues, like constant gunfire battles, like Eddie and Boone are with me, like getting knocked out, but also killing these guys. I sneak over into like one of Caesar's side rooms and I find what I need, which is this thing called the slave ledger. And I grab that from the table and I stealth again so I can be hidden. But now this is like my last or my next to last stealth boy, I think. And I still have to turn around and get out. But Caesar's here. And I think to myself...
He's right there.
Right,
he's so close.
He's right there.
He's 10 feet away maximum from that ledger.
But here's the thing about gambling, Cameron. Is you got to know when to hold him.
He's right there.
You got to know when to hold him and when to fold him, and when to walk away and when to run. Caesar's going to be here later. Right now, I have other things to do, and I know I'm going to have to come back to the fort later, and that's when Caesar and I are going to have our heart-to-heart. So I end up stealthing out and escaping from the fort, but this entire time I've just like, it's just been chaos, like things exploding around me, like growling dogs, like heads falling off. And then I get down and I run away and I head back and I hand Regis the literal slave journal. Like this is the thing that the man needs for proof is Caesar's book, where he's like, here are all of the tribes that I betrayed and then enslaved. And luckily, that's enough to convince him. Here's the other joke here. I'm pretty sure I didn't have to do this because something that I read in the walkthrough that I consult when I'm like breaking up quests is that you actually only need to convince 3 of the advisors. But the game doesn't tell you that. Like Regis himself tells you you have to convince all of us.
Yeah. Huh. Well, yeah, I had the same thing. I had to go and talk to Caesar as well. I thought that I didn't really know what I was looking for. So I was like, oh, Caesar's here. I guess he must be the one to tell me what's up. And, I don't like him. And then he's like, I had a long conversation with him. He was like, why are you here? He's like, you keep messing my stuff up. I know everything about you. And he like lays out. It's like the end of a Fallout game, right? He like lays out everything you have done so far up to talking to him. Like every quest outcome and all kinds of stuff. It's pretty cool. It's a neat thing to have happen. And he's like, yeah, we could be bros. And I was like, I don't know if I want to be bros because unlike you, who, Lucky Nell wants to think about gambling and is kind of thinking of the world in some sort of the gambler scenario. Lucky Nell, of course, would later go on to win a Nobel Prize for her work in what is called the gambler scenario. There's going to be a film about it in 2022. But so anyway, I talked to Caesar, and he's like, yeah. Anyway, he like wants me to do some stuff, and I just think, I will defeat you in the realm of politics, sir. I will defeat you in the realm of civility. I don't believe in punching. And so Tonk goes and he just picks up the slave ledger and goes and takes it back and is able actually, so I feed all of this, which I'm assuming you do. I give all of this to Papa Khan, and he still says, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know about this. He says, but he basically says, what are we if not for our future glory? And that's when I went and talked to the follower of the Apocalypse guy, because I had to find something glorious from their past. Mm-hmm. Like some like nostalgia for a past that has been forgotten. I had to find history for them, which is nonsensical. Like these people, if they have such strong cultural practices, they would have their own history. It's only 200 years. Mm-hmm. They would have cultural stories to tell themselves. But anyway, I go and talk to the follower of the Apocalypse guy, and he tells me all the stuff I talked about earlier in the episode. And then he says, yeah, it seems like they just based their whole culture off of the Khans in the Mongol Empire. You know about these guys? And I was like, no, not really. He says, oh, well, here's a book about it. You can give them this book. They can learn about the Mongol Empire.
Okay.
By the by, they're not really like the Mongol Empire very much, as far as I know.
No.
But I did have another option here because I talked to the NCR about making an alliance. And my commanding officer there said, well, you can try to make an alliance, but it seems like this second in command guy is the one we want to work with. I don't think ever, Papa Khan is ever going to do it. So you should murder him and then just let the number 2 guy come into power, and then we'll make a deal with him. I feel like there's some political commentary going on in that as well. But I didn't go for that. I felt like it was weird to like murder Papa Khan. Mm-hmm. So ultimately, the scenario ended up where I do all of this, and Papa Khan says, "Okay, we will break our allegiance with the Legion, but we will not ally with the NCR, and we're just going to get out of here. We're going to kind of like nomad our way somewhere else out of the Mojave for a while." And that's how the quest ended for me.
Yeah, it was very similar to me. I didn't have to go do the whole sort of like history scavenger hunt thing with the followers because I think it was a intelligence or a speech check. But I could just I had the options where I could either say like, basically like, don't worry, Papa Khan, like there's still a future, maybe even too much of it. But you have time to kind of like, form your own kind of tradition or like make your own kind of claim on the world, whatever. Basically all hope is not lost for the Khans as a concept. Or I could tell him that they are nothing more than ghosts and martyrs, which is just a hell of a thing to say to someone. But
God.
Yeah. So I sort of like I weighed these options. I could like try to crush his spirit entirely, or I could try to get him to, fight another day or try something new. Lucky Nell decided, well, I mean, so much of the Wasteland is a great case study in how any random group of people, if given the right circumstances and in sort of the right conditions, can make their own casino. And so I think, well, if I'm really nice to the Khans, maybe they'll start their own casino out here in Red Rock Canyon. But no, I'm nice to him, and then he does the same thing that he did for you, where he's like, you're right. Like, what we need to do is totally leave this area forever. And that's going to happen after the end of the game, because we're not going to move any of these assets.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know one way or the other. I assumed that maybe the assets wouldn't update, but I kind of thought, oh, maybe they'll just despawn all these NPCs. But I didn't leave, so to find out.
Yeah. So what can actually happen here is that if you had gone with the second option, and I assume you would have had either the exact same or a kind of equivalent option, if I had done the Ghosts and Martyrs thing, that would have driven Papa Khan into such a kind of like nihilistic despair that he would in fact lead a suicide run against Caesar's Legion, and the Khans would be destroyed.
God.
Yeah.
Well, glad you didn't do it. Yeah, I think I like the Khans in a broad sense. Like, it feels like, despite all the like, the refashioning of real world stuff into this framework that we've talked about a lot, I think that there's some interesting stuff going on with them, and I like the narrative of this whole game is kind of like what happens when a bunch of big powers run into each other, and the Khans are a pretty good example of, well, what happens to the smaller powers when that happens, like people who cannot really be absorbed into the power structures that come to dominate the geography. I don't think the blow by blow and even the major assumptions, I don't think necessarily land for me, but I do like the setup. And I think that I like this quest in a general sense of like, you need to figure out how to get these, from my perspective, from the NCR perspective, how to get them at least to unalign from your enemies, and hopefully not destroy them. I think that was pretty good.
Yeah. No, I feel the same way about the Khans, that sort of ambivalence of like, well, there's all of these like particular things that are going on here that I'm not wild about, but I really like, I like the fact that the Khans do fit back into the narrative all the way to the first game, that you can take the story of the Khans and you can use that to kind of like map out all of the things that have shifted in this region, and sort of like see how like the growth of the NCR has had numerous types of effects that are sort of, beside the point from the NCR's perspective. But, the only reason the Khans are here is because the NCR expanded to the degree that they got pushed out. And now, as you say, here they are kind of caught between the people who booted them out of their original home and the Legion, and they have to make a choice there, and they choose the Legion, but then you can have them choose something else.
Yeah. Well, what are we doing in the next episode?
Next time, we will be continuing with kind of main quest business. We are going to head back to the Strip, and we are going to check in with the Omertas at Gomorrah.
That's interesting. Let's see what they're up to, because we've both had a little bit of interaction with them, but not a huge amount. Okay, cool. Well, we'll be back in 2 weeks with that episode. You can go to twitter.com/rangetouch to see everything we're up to, and you can listen to our other shows like Just King Things, where we're reading all of Stephen King's novels in publication order, or Homestuck Made This World, where we are reading through Homestuck and talking about it critically, kind of bit by bit. You can check out Mages and Murder Dads, which is a show where Danny and I play through the games in the Baldur's Gate lineage. We're currently playing or about to play, when you hear this, Icewind Dale. So if you like that game, come check it out. We just finished up Disco Elysium. You can learn about every single one of these shows over on rangedtouch.com, or you can check it out youtube.com/rangedtouch, where you are probably checking this out already. If you like what we are doing, go to patreon.com/rangedtouch. There's a link down in the description below. If you want to listen to this as a podcast, you can give us a little bit of money over there, and you can get the RSS feed for this show to listen to on the go. And, think about it this way. If you like the show and you get enjoyment out of it, think about throwing us a couple dollars a month, buying us a cup of coffee a month. If everyone buys us a cup of coffee every month, then we have way more money than a cup of coffee. And that's good, because it takes a lot of time to play and edit and listen to and do all the stuff that we do. We put a lot of time into Ranged Touch, and we thank you so much if you're already a supporter. And if you're not a supporter, think about it. It'll help us out a whole lot. Michael, what is the big question you have you want them to answer down in the comments below? Alongside there, of course, doing it for the algorithm, which we need desperately.
Mm-hmm. Why haven't the tunnel snakes come back as a great force in the world?
Oh, that's a great question. Tunnel Snakes West.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's great. We will be back in 2 weeks, and we will be checking out the Omertas.
Until next time, war never changes, but Fallout sure does.
Everything changed when the bombs fell, except for war.